Afternoon, everyone. Afternoon, and hope you're doing well. Hopefully, you guys can hear me okay. My name is Scoot. Welcome to Scoot Talk Sports, episode 2. I'm really excited about where this show is going and the people that we brought on today. It's going to be a really fun conversation. Today, we're going to be talking to two guests, a little bit of a roundtable format. We're going to be breaking down the the Canada US Gold Cup game yesterday that occurred. A really tough loss for Canada and truly an impressive win for the States. So I brought in Benedict Rhodes. He's an aspiring journalism student who's also covering the Canadian national men's team, the women's team, and as well as interning with the Canadian Premier League. So really excited to bring him on. TobesLeroney, we're going to call him Tobes for the sake of it. He's a United States men's national team nutbag. He's a statistical whiz. And I thought it would be really interesting to bring these two folks on for a segment and have a little bit of a chat about the game yesterday. And then we'll move into a segment with a friend of mine, Dan. We're going to talk a little bit about the Blackhawks, the sexual assault scandal that's going on there, and maybe touch on a bit of the expansion draft in the NHL if we get time for it. So thank you so much again for everybody who's been following along on stream, watching the show live on Twitch here Mondays and Fridays at 12 p.m. Central Time. We do record the podcast live here, and it's a little bit of fun. We try to bring the chat in a little bit here and there. And the really interesting part is me learning kind of how to edit. So as you're listening to these episodes, as you're watching these episodes, if you have a suggestion, you have an idea, a topic, a guest, just as being shouted out in there, we would love to bring you on. And Jeffrey, I just haven't had a chance to reach out to you yet, so it's on the list. It's definitely on the list. So appreciate everybody who's jumped in. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our first two guests here for a bit of a conversation around the Gold Cup match yesterday. For those who watched it, feel free to jump in and drop any questions you have. I'll be trying to bring in the questions for the guys when appropriate. So appreciate, again, everyone listening along, everybody watching along. Thank you for being here. Without any further ado, let's bring in the two gentlemen here. We have Tobes and Benedict. Benedict, I think you're still muted. You can feel free to unmute. There you go.
Hey, Scoot.
How's it going,
Happy
guys?
to be here.
Thanks very much for being here, guys. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time today, and also for moving along with me as we learn a bit about the platform, a little bit about what I'm doing with the show in general. So thank you very much for being here, guys. Tobes, I did a little bit of an intro right off the bat there, but I introduced you as
Scoot, I have to stop you right there.
Yeah.
I just.
What's up?
I can't quite hear you unless I have your stream open. I don't know if there's a way for me to hear your audio.
There should be a way through the browser itself. Maybe I've muted myself. I don't think so. And this is okay, guys, because I can edit this out of the podcast. It's the beautiful part about recording this live. So don't worry if there's an issue. Just point it out.
So I'm responding to you many seconds late, I'm hearing.
Okay. Let me see here. So like when I go into, if you go down to the bottom where it says mute, there's a little bit of toggle arrow beside there.
Mm-hmm.
Just check your audio output and see if it's going to where you need it to go. And yes, Leone absolutely is an impressive. We have two bearded gentlemen on here, actually. So while Tobes, you're filling that, let me know if it works. I'll go ahead and introduce Benedict here. Benedict,
I'm playing around with it. Apologies.
No worries. Benedict, you're a journalism student. You're also interning with the Canadian Premier League, and you've been covering the Canadian national teams for quite some time, I believe. Is there anything that I missed out in there? Anything that I should add, Benedict?
Not really. That's kind of the situation at the moment. I'm currently on loan at the Canadian Premier League. I'll be heading back to Wake in the Red in August. Looking forward to going back there and continuing to cover the national teams there as well. Just you see Jeffrey in the chat here. Shout out to Jeffrey and the Wake in the Red guys as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, Wake in the Red, if you guys don't know, is a really well established group of journalists, group of fans that have been writing all sorts of coverage on the Canadian national teams and players across the country. Tobes, how you doing? Are you? Oh, I think I can't hear you now, so you might have adjusted your microphone to something where I can't hear you. There we go. We got you.
Okay. I'm an old man, apparently. I don't know what's happening.
Don't. Don't even worry about that, Tobes. This is all new to me. It's only really the second time I've run this platform, and like I said, I need practice on editing audio anyway, so this will give me an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, you can cut all that out.
So again, thanks very much, guys. Obviously, I'll be saying that quite a bit as we work through some of the hiccups as I learn this system. But we've talked a bit about where Benedict brings that expertise, where he's been spending his time covering the Canadian team. Tobes, I introduced you as sort of a statistical numbers whiz, a little bit of a United States soccer nut. Is there anything that I should add to that, or is that sort of summarize you?
That pretty much does it. I've just been a fan of the men's and women's national teams here for since I guess the 2010 World Cup, when I was in, I think I graduated middle school the day we played against Algeria. So the fandom has slowly grown over time, and it's been fun to see, us kind of actually start to build a program and produce top level prospects that we haven't really ever done before. So to kind of follow that growth has been really exciting.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you again for being here, guys. So we want to talk primarily around the game yesterday, and I'm assuming both of you guys had a time watching it. It was certainly got started quick. I think quicker than any of us really realized. But before we get into the game itself, what were you thinking about before the game? What were your concerns? Were you excited for this game, or with the chosen selection, with all the different tournaments going on, with some guys being rested? How did you feel before the game? I'll start with you, Benedict.
Yeah, I think something we haven't been able to say a lot over the past decades, I guess, is looking forward to playing against the United States now. I think Canada doesn't want to be seen as like the little brother anymore. That's the word to keep.
Oh, I think we lost Benedict there. Are you back?
Oh, did I cut out there?
Yeah, cut out there. There we go.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So you're saying
Canada doesn't want to be seen as like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Canada doesn't want to be seen as like the little brother to the United States anymore, and it's exciting now that they have the ambition and the players, I think, to be able to beat the United States and at least be competitive with them. And so entering a game against them optimistic as well is obviously a huge bonus.
What did you think, Tobes? What were you looking for? What were you thinking before the game started?
I was excited. Well, coming into the tournament, I was really excited to see, a lot of the players on the U.S. roster here are depth pieces who are trying to fight their way into the top 23. I think right now there's maybe 5 players that are actually in the top 23, but it's the players right below that, a lot of the young guys with high potential that were going to be in this roster. And coming into the tournament, I was really excited to see, can they do anything against Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David? Unfortunately, neither of those players ended up being here. So as exciting as the game was from a U.S. versus Canada perspective, I don't think either side will come into World Cup qualifying next month and say, or 2 months from now, and say, this game was representative of what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a very different teams playing against each other in the future.
Absolutely. And for myself, I think I would have to echo a little bit of what Benedict said. We're in these opportunities now where we get to be excited about any possibility in these games. We have the type of players and then the strength and quality now to think, hey, we're not just going to try and go for a draw here. I'm not just thinking about trying to steal a point. There's the opportunity to take all 3. There's the opportunity to think that we could play, a little bit more of an exciting style of football, of soccer, right? So it was, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit nervous, just given on the fact that, Canada-US games, what any sport for me, I'm always excited. I'm always a little bit nervous because it means more sometimes to me than I think the game means to the players, in the sense that, we weren't really fighting for, moving into the next round. That was already done. We knew we were going into the next phase. It was more of a bragging rights, who won the group. And of course, whenever Canada, has the opportunity to beat the States, like we saw in the Nations League in 2019. Tobes, you remember I was living through that win for a few weeks after that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right, and then of course we went down to Florida, faced the same squad, and lost 4-1. Right, so it was one of those things where, that 4-1 loss, very minimal in my mind, and then that 1-0 win is just fills up the brain, right?
That's how it is, though, for everyone.
Exactly. So in terms of the game, what would you guys think of the starters, the selection for that game? Tobes, I'll start with you. Was there anything that stood out for you from the American side of things?
Yeah, it was interesting because I had been calling for him to play a 3-5-2. which he ended up doing. And I was happy with that initially because the roster really only had one true winger, Paul Arriola, who went out injured in the first game. So with no wingers, I was really hoping he would move away from his 4-3-3 or 3-4-3. And he did. He went with the 3-5-2. But that was about where my happiness ended. Because the two best players in our previous game against Martinique were Matthew Hoppe, striker at Schalke, who, scored a Bundesliga hat trick this season, and Eric Williamson, a creative attacking midfielder for the Portland Timbers. I'm hoping he gets moved to Europe. And both of them were left on the bench. Hoppe came on in the 76th minute, and Williamson never came on. So I was worried as soon as I saw the lineup that we were not going to be able to have any sort of creative attacking outlet, and our midfield was just going to be people who like to pass backwards.
What were your thoughts on the picks for Canada, Benedict? What was your first, thoughts when you saw the roster revealed?
Yeah, I think the big standout was Io Akinola playing against the United States. There's obviously some bragging rights there as well. I guess he finally chose Canada. Fortunately, he came off pretty early in that game. But he did look good for the 20 minutes, was it, that he was on the pitch. Tajon Buchanan's been Canada's best player in the tournament, I think, and he was really good as well on that left-hand side. And the back three was always going to be interesting to see how they played that out, and that's what Herman went for, and I think it was pretty effective.
What did you think of the midfield choices? Like, it seemed to me like they were going for kind of a ball-winning midfield, really wanting to ensure they locked it down and played sort of a tight, tough midfield player. Did you kind of agree with what you saw as well?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think they missed Stefan Eustachio in that game. I think they needed sort of a midfielder to sort of unlock the defense a bit more. Junior Hoyle played kind of in that 10 role. I think having someone a bit deeper behind him would have been good. Obviously, Eustachio was suspended for that game. Can't do much about that. But I thought Piet and Fraser were really good.
Yeah. Any thoughts on Tobes? Any thoughts on the Canadian the lineup, the tactical choices there? Did you think that they made the right choices against your lineup, or was there anything that shocked you?
I think a lot of it made sense. I know Marc-Anthony Tay started on the bench. If I remember correctly, he was on a yellow card. So I think Canada did, as much as this game felt like it mattered to us, we're both going to the quarterfinals. Why get Marc-Anthony Tay suspended? Eustachio was already suspended. So I was, none of it seemed too surprising to me. I was interested to see what side Tajon Buchanan was going to play on. And he actually kind of played on both. It seemed like he started going up against Jack Moore on the left-hand side for Canada. And then about the 30-minute mark, which is also when I thought the game kind of shifted, but I'm sure we'll get into that later. He shifted over and went up against Sam Vines.
What about you, Bennett? Did you see anything shocking or a little bit surprising from the American lineup in your eyes?
I think I was excited to see Busio in the center midfield. I thought he was very good. Also, the double striker of Zardes and DK wasn't necessarily unexpected. I just don't know if they were used the most effectively. It seemed like a lot of the time the Americans were kind of just booting the ball down the field, kind of hoping the best, and I think that played very well into Canada's hands in the end.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so let's get right to a little bit of the elephant into the room, and that would be the first 20 seconds of the game. So, we're sitting down. For those who were with us yesterday, we did a little bit of a watch along on the channel, and I'm sitting there with a friend of mine from overseas who's an absolute neutral, and I'm getting ready for this epic battle. And 20 seconds in, we see Canada absolutely collapse into an extremely narrow formation, which allows for this pass to go right across the box and America to take the early 1-0 lead. I'll start with you, Benedict. What was your first reaction in to that goal and the start for Canada?
I'll be honest, I missed the goal. I thought I'll just go get a bottle of water or something. Just won't miss much in the first minute, and then of course they score. You mentioned they're pretty narrow. I think Tajon Buchanan sort of held his hands up after the game and sort of took some fault, I guess, for not marking Shaq Moore at the back post. And strong starts has been kind of a problem for Canada, and they were punished for that again.
Yeah, and it really just looked to me like the Americans came out absolutely amped. Like they just came out. Like you think about a wind-up car, they were fully wound. The Canadians needed a bit more winding before they started the game. Tobes, obviously you must have been shocked and happy with that start, but what did you think? What was your takeaway from that moment? Was it truly Canada just was not ready to go?
Yeah, I think it was that. I think that the United States against Haiti too, he scored in the 8th minute and then proceeded to kind of not really dominated against Haiti, but play a very 50-50 game the rest of the way out. Whereas this game, we scored in the first 20 seconds kind of caught Canada asleep. I think Canada also conceded pretty early to Martinique, a similar mistake. But then, after the water break at 30 minutes, the same thing happened against Haiti. I think you're always very good to capitalize on your strength of getting ahead early. But I'm sure, as we'll get to later, it did not stay that way.
Yes. And that's kind of the next segment. I wanted to talk a bit about the tactical changes we saw in that game, because it was interesting to see the changes being made, especially for Canada, right at that kind of 20 to 30 minute mark. And then again, the Americans came out, I thought, in a little bit of a different formation, a little bit different feel in the second half. Let's talk a little bit about the Canadian tactics to start. And I think you kind of alluded to it there. Both of you actually alluded to it, where we saw a change in terms of which side the wingers or those outside players were playing. And we saw what I saw. And again, I'm still an amateur. I'm still a fan. I don't see everything maybe the way that E02 guys do, but I saw a lot more interest in cutting into the middle and taking a shot and looking for options from Canada once they switched those guys on the sides. Benedict, I'll start with you. What did you see from that tactical change early, around 20 to 30 minutes, and what did you think it did for Canada?
I also think it was partly brought about Nola, and bringing on Jonathan Osorio. Canada were kind of forced to maybe go a little bit more wide, whereas with Akinola, they probably could have gone a bit more route one, I guess, as people call it, down the middle. The football manager term, as I know you guys like. I think Tejan Buchanan and Richie Laie on either side were kind of playing a few more crosses than they maybe were anticipating earlier in the game.
What did you think, Tobes, from the Canadian changes? What did it make America, like the American team, have to do? What did they have to do to adjust in that first half?
Well, the thing I've been most critical about Greg Berhalter is his in-game management. And I think it was pretty clear Canada made some changes at the 20, 30-minute mark. That, obviously they moved Tejan to the other side. Akinola came off, that switched with the midfield a little bit with Osorio coming on. But I thought the biggest actual change that affected the game the most was that Canada figured out how to press together as a team. I think the first 20 minutes they weren't cohesive, they weren't pressing at the right times, always kind of leaving an open man. But I think at 20, 30 minutes marks, they had that hydration break. It seemed like they came out of that hydration break. The coach had told them, when this happens, you press here, and we could not escape our own half after that for the rest of the half. The last 15 minutes, I was sitting there going like, it doesn't matter if Miles Robinson's winning the ball off Tejan Buchanan, because he passes to our left back, and then there's 10 people, and no one's open, and no one's being creative off the ball, and we just get the ball right back. And it just felt like an onslaught of the 15 minutes of pressure until halftime.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I saw a lot of much better control, whereas that first 15 to 20 minutes, there seemed to be always a couple of options for every American player. They seemed comfortable. They seemed unconcerned with the Canadian defenders or the pressure. There just didn't seem to be enough to really keep those guys on their toes or feeling like they were having to make a play. I think there was even times where, I was seeing some of the Canadian forwards, and I can't remember who, but they were kind of walking up, I would say about 6 feet away, and then slowing down. They weren't executing that pressure all the way up, like they were afraid of what that player might do. And I don't know if that's just a preparation thing, or maybe they were thinking they would play in a different way, or they were just trying to play more cautious and give them more space. Once the halftime came along, I think we saw some changes from the Americans in the way they played. From the way I saw it, it really looked like they moved to a much more structured, almost a 5-back kind of setup. What did you see there, Tobes?
Yeah, so we were playing kind of with a 5-back from the start, but it would get confusing because James Sands was playing in the center of that 5-back. As if this was FM, he was libero on attack. When we had the ball, he would step forward to the midfield as like a 6, as a DM, and start spraying passes. And then in the second half, when we barely touched the ball, I think it became much more evident that when we did not have possession, we were sitting with the 5-back. James Sands was in the center of that. And I think it was more just the lack of possession, the fact that the U.S. never had the ball, that it became much more clear that we weren't kind of shifting between a 4-4-2 diamond and a 5-3-2. It was very much 5-back, 3 center midfielders, and then the 2 up top. And that was kind of another one of the problems, was that the 2 up top coming into the second half, neither of them would really drop at all, whether we had the ball or not. It just felt like 2 guys sitting up there. So our 3 midfielders could not handle the overload from Canada. I think it was a 4v3 the whole time. There was always someone open. And that was, not great.
So you would have liked probably to see those two forwards drop deep. I mean, maybe not as deep as a Kane for England in the Euros, but something along those lines where he's dropping back into the midfield.
At least one of them. And that was the problem with this team selection, I thought, because Zardes and DK are both not that. They both want to press the back line, try to go over the top, outmuscle people. And they both want to do that. So when we get the ball and there's two people running at the same person in the same space, whereas I would have liked to see Matthew Hoppe as the other striker, because he's able to come deep, find those pockets of space, and relieve the pressure.
What did you think, Benedict, in terms of the way that was seen? Did you feel like that 5-back served the Americans well, or did you think that it really was Canada's ball to win in that second half?
Yeah, I think as Tobes mentioned with the two strikers, I think they sort of invited a lot of pressure to the American midfield, and that sort of allowed like Canada to play like a 3-4-3, and I think that sort of midfield triangle for Canada sort of had a lot of free reign against the Americans, and I definitely think that was probably not by design for Greg Berhalter, but by not having one of Zardes or DK drop back, it's just an extra space for Canadian midfielder to push forward a little bit and to control more of the ball.
Here's a question for you. We all saw the almost pens that were called in a couple of that were not called, during that game. But we obviously heard on the Canadian commentary on One Soccer, they made it kind of a big deal out of the I'm trying to remember the center back's name from the States who kind of
Walker Zimmerman.
Walker Zimmerman, thank you. So that play generated a lot of discussion on the Canadian side of things. Absolutely. What did you think, Benedict? Did you think it was a penalty? Did you think that was something that should have been called? Given that we have VAR in this tournament, was it something they should have gone upstairs and maybe had more of a conversation or a look at?
I think it was a penalty. I think Richie Laie is so good at running in behind the defenders and drawing penalties, and Walker Zimmerman not only tripped him at the edge of the box, but also touched it with his hand when he went down. Like Walker Zimmerman was never fouled in that situation, but he reached down and touched the ball. So that to me, that's two penalties, and neither one was called. And I think VAR probably should have had a look at that.
Here's a question for you before we let Tobes jump in, of course, because I know there's going to be another opinion here. But did you think that was a soft penalty? Like it was something that should be called, but it was relatively soft? Or was it something that you felt was like, hey, that's egregious. Why wasn't it called?
Yeah,
and that goes to you,
Benedict. Borderline. I think it is borderline. I think if he hadn't touched the ball with his hand when he went down, I would have been less sure that it was a penalty. But I do think it was probably like a 51-49 kind of situation towards being a penalty, I'd say.
Tobes, what are your thoughts? Did you see a penalty there, or were you seeing something a little bit different?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that whatever it was awful refereeing. Like there's no way that the outcome of that play is a Canadian corner kick. There's absolutely the ball doesn't even go out of bounds. There's no way you can't call a corner kick. So the discussion that was happening on the American broadcast is that I'm sorry, I can't remember the fullback's name. It's like
now I'm gonna try and screw up his name, so I'll let Benedict do it because he just clarified how to say his name.
Yeah, I think he wants to go by Richie Laie.
Okay. Richie Laie. So he clearly gets around Zimmerman. For the American homers who are saying it's never a pen, their claim is that Richie Laie kind of shoves Walker Zimmerman to get him off balance. So it's a foul against Richie Laie to get. But if you don't call that foul, which the referee didn't, Walker Zimmerman proceeds to tackle Richie Laie and then hand the ball in the box. So if that's not a foul, then it's clearly a penalty. And then it gets called for a corner and no one looks at it. And you're just like, it's terrible refereeing no matter what you think happened. I think it was a penalty. I don't think the shove on Walker Zimmerman knocked him off balance. So I think he kind of tripped. I think Walker Zimmerman kind of tripped, fell onto the guy and the ball and handed the ball. I think it should have been a penalty.
Yeah, I think I tried my best to just be as least biased as possible when I was watching. But my first reaction was, whoa, because when I saw the stumble, like obviously there was a little bit of a push by Laie, just to kind of, as they're battling, they're square, their shoulders.
Yeah, it's like shoulder to shoulder contact.
It's shoulder to shoulder contact. So I immediately go, yeah, there's a push, but at the same time, that's the type of shoulder to shoulder battle that we're going to want and expect in those spaces. But what I thought, and maybe it's because I don't know, but the point is, I think he could have regained his balance, and I think he played the balance falling. I think he kind of dived forward, and that's where I go. That's where I go. Hey, right? I think it was. I think it could have been a penalty, but I think the weirdest thing that came out of that absolutely was how did it become a corner? Like
It's nonsense.
there was a number of ways.
I would have been fine if they just didn't call anything. Like I think it's either a penalty or it's just play on. I think like I didn't see the ball go out of bounds. I'm not sure it was a corner kick.
Mm-hmm. I don't think the ball ever went out of bounds. I remember watching the replays and just seeing Walker Zimmerman fall on the ball, and then he's injured, so the trainers come out, and the ball's just like sitting there in bounds.
Yeah, and it was one of those situations where I was sort of expecting VAR to come into play. I was expecting there to be a little bit like I didn't see it. Maybe they did go upstairs, and maybe we didn't see it, but I never saw him seem to have that conversation and say, "Hang on a second, like I'm gonna." I think if it had gone to VAR, it would have been a penalty. But you know what? At the same time, this is CONCACAF. We're familiar with what type of officiating consistency we get game to game. It's frustrating.
I'll clarify again that I do think that one was a penalty. And also that CONCACAF officiating is traditionally terrible. But this game was odd even more than that, because it's usually traditionally terrible in the sense that they refuse to call fouls that are clear fouls. I remember watching even Canada against Haiti for World Cup qualification. Alphonso Davies is getting like tackled. They're trying to break his ankles, and the CONCACAF players just don't call fouls. In this game, it was weird because 80% of the time people would foul people and they wouldn't call it. And then the other 20% of the time, there would be like shoulder-to-shoulder contact between DK and a center back, and the ref would blow his whistle and just point a direction, like flipping a coin. It felt like even worse than normal refereeing, and it went against Canada most of the time, I would say.
Are you shocked by this kind of conversation, though, Benedict? I know you've been covering, the Canadian national teams for a long time. Are you shocked by these kinds of conversations happening again and again? Like, it just seems to be something we, as fans, as pundits, as journalists, we don't really know what that consistency is. So from game to game, it sometimes is a little bit hard to judge. What are your thoughts, Benedict?
It's just another day in CONCACAF, isn't it? I think like you never know what to predict with CONCACAF. It's just so unexpected or unexpected saying, but I don't know. I don't even know how to analyze refereeing in CONCACAF anymore.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's a variable in the game, almost a little bit of a wild card that we just have to deal with as part of being fans in this part. And I'm seeing some fantastic conversation, little drops in here. Jeffrey, it was a pen, no question. And Kane, making a little bit of a joke. The ref we deserved. It was one of those games where I wasn't completely distracted by the officiating. It didn't really interrupt the game from a really drastic point, but there was calls there where it just didn't make a lot of sense. Moving on, here's a thought, because we could talk about CONCACAF officiating
we could
forever. I mean, it's a part of the fun in this side, right? But what stood out for you in the game? For me, like if I wanted to say what stood out for me, I really think Canada's switch, moving the wingers to the opposite side, was the change for me. Obviously, Canada really had trouble getting the ball into the box, but that final 30 minutes or so, it just seemed to be the same. Canada controlling the ball, feeling comfortable, moving it back left and right, moving it to the outside, but really struggling to get it into the box. But I was happy with that. Like, it's one of those things where we lost, and I'm feeling it's upsetting that we lost, but at the same time, the way we played after going down 1-0 so early, making tactical changes that really did seem to change the favor of play, the momentum back to our side, and then to retain that kind of possession and that momentum throughout till the end of the game, unfortunately not being rewarded for it. But I was impressed with that change. Tobes, what was your thoughts at the end of that game? Did you feel a little bit different than me, obviously?
Yeah, so as an American fan, I was less familiar with Tajon Buchanan. Obviously, I've been hearing that he was, the Canada's best player in this tournament. And when I was disappointed that I wasn't going to get to see Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David and try to see how our, fourth and fifth best kind of depth center backs and wing backs would try to be able to handle him. I didn't expect Tajon Buchanan to come out, and just like his dribbling ability with the ball, like, shocked me. This guy is going to move out of MLS. Like, he has to. He's too good for it. He really stood out to me. And seeing Shaq Moore kind of deal with him, and then seeing him switch over, and Sam Vines also try to deal with him, it was horrifying. I would say he was definitely the standout for me in the game.
Benedict, what was your standout of the game? Players, moments, anything that stood out for you?
Yeah, I'd agree, sort of on that in that sort of same light. But just the versatility of Canada, I think Tejan Buchanan played 3 positions in that game. He sort of played as a attacking midfielder later in the game as well. Junior Hoylett dropping back into the number 10 role instead of usually being a winger. I thought he was pretty good there. Alistair Johnston playing as a sort of a right center back in a back 3, and I think the versatility for Canada was pretty solid overall. And Tejan Buchanan obviously was the sort of star of the show.
He really was. When he was on the ball, it felt like everyone kind of moved to the edge of your seat a little bit, whether you were nervous, horrified, as Tobes mentioned, or if you were excited because you weren't too sure, what was going to happen next, right? And I'm seeing a little bit of banter in the chat here. We've got Stick Piano mentioning that, Turner saves the pen anyway, so it will save us the embarrassment. And then we've got Jeffrey coming in here. Don't even worry about that. And this is what we expect. This is what we love to see, right? Is I think, most football fans in Europe don't understand how intense Canada-US matches can be. I think a lot of us see us as the Americas. We're all sort of the same. But Canada, for one, we could talk a little bit about this. Canada we've always been whatever you want to call it, America's hat, the loft department up top, whatever it is. So when we get a chance to force Americans to watch us win something, it always makes top news up here. And I think as an American fan, you can let me know if you're wrong or not, Tobes, but it's always nice to show Canada what's what, whether it's, in hockey or soccer or football or whatever it is. It just seems like these matches always have a little bit of energy for them. Tobes, would you agree? Is that these are important matches, not always for the results, but just for the bragging rights?
Yeah, so it's been a while since we played Canada kind of routinely in games that actually mattered. Canada kind of hadn't made the hex for a while, but with the development of some of the players that Canada has, I think the rivalry's back on. I think every game does have that elevated, maybe not as much as US-Mexico. Those games are, I think, a next level of craziness, but I think Canada's definitely up there now.
Benedict, what did you think? Is this a rivalry that matters more for Canadians or more for Americans? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely probably America's second rivalry behind Mexico, as you mentioned. But I think as Canada starts to get more competitive and Canada starts to challenge for the hexagon or the octagon, whatever you want to call it now,
yeah,
I think it's gonna catch up, and I think Canada's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And with any team, if someone directly challenging you, that's always going to start a rivalry, and especially when it's your neighbor. I think it's going to be a great rivalry for years to come as both these programs develop.
I'm really looking forward to it. I look forward to the day, and who knows how far away it is, but I look forward to this dream, this idea that when both America, the States and Canada are in the World Cup, at the same time, if that ever does happen, I think that we Tobes and me, we can share a drink and we can have that moment of, hey, we're here, right? And then whatever happens, right? But,
we kind of cheated our way into that hosting 2026. We're both doing that. So
that's true. Yeah, well, real qualification, let's say, not the standard invite that we've had before, or in '86 where we did qualify. But question around man of the match. This is a great shout here from chat. Stick Piano calls James Sands as the man of the match. What do you think was your man of the match? I'll start with you, Benedict.
Yeah, Sands was good, but despite being on the losing side, I'd probably still say Tejan Buchanan. I just think he was the most important player on the pitch. Like everyone was. For Canada, everyone was getting the ball to him, and for America, everyone was guarding him. So the result didn't favor Canada, but I still say Tejan Buchanan was the best player on the pitch.
Tobes, your thoughts on the man of the match?
Yeah, I'm torn a little bit. Sands was the best player for the United States, for sure. Kind of playing as that almost libero, stepping into a midfield role when we had the ball. His passing was incredible. He seemed to be the only person, especially after Walker Zimmerman got injured so early. Donovan Pines and Miles Zimmerman were not making progressive passes. Our wingbacks were, maybe not tactically in the right spot. So it was really on James Sands to move the ball. His passing percentage was great. The way he was able to slide balls to Busio, Leggett, Acosta, who then would proceed to lose the ball and make James Sands win it back. I think the number of interceptions James Sands has, he definitely has a shout. And I think maybe because Canada failed to score, even with the number of chances that Tejan Buchanan created, I might give it to James Sands having the clean sheet.
Fair. I think there's a good shout for a few of them, and it's one of those games where it's tough too because that first 10 minutes that defined who went ahead really didn't define how the game felt the rest of the way through. It was a very interesting match for sure. And I think if people are just looking at the scoreline and go, oh yeah, America won, like that's not the story of the game. I think
not at all.
Much more depth to that. But concerning for Canada was, I think, seeing Akinola go down and having to come off. I think that is a big concern for the rest of the Gold Cup, as well as for Toronto FC. But what I'm hearing this morning is it might be 4 to 6 weeks. Benedict, have you heard anything more detailed around Akinola's injury or how long he could be out?
I don't have any insight to that, but one thing that was announced maybe 2 hours ago was that CONCACAF is going to allow replacement players for injuries for the knockout round. So be interesting to see if John Herdman uses that for Akinola once he has a bit of a better idea of what this injury looks like.
Do you have any idea if there's limits on that? Like, is it a certain amount of players you can replace, or is it if you have 6 injuries, you can bring in 6 players?
I'm not too sure, but I imagine also depends on Kyle Larin as well. Kyle Larin also went down with an injury in the second half. So Canada have at least 2, I guess, that they could at least ask about.
Tobes, what do you think? Was there any injuries for the American team yesterday?
Yeah, injuries kind of defined the game. If you think about it, Walker Zimmerman went out after maybe conceding a pin, and we got injured on the same play. We came into this tournament with only 4 center backs, really 3 center backs, because James Sands is defensive midfielder center back hybrid, and we were playing 3 at the back. Walker Zimmerman was our captain, and he goes down. We put in Donovan Pines, who's, when you're looking at the U.S. men's national team center back depth chart, he is in the double digits. Like, there are so many: Cameron Carter-Vickers, Eric Palmer-Brown rejected call-ups. There's Chris Richards, Matt Miazga. I could go on forever. I haven't even said John Brooks. He is so far down the list, and he got caught in possession so many times, just getting pressed by that Canadian press and just giving the ball away. So that's going to be huge. His health is going to be huge. And then Daryl DK got hurt at the end of the game. It looked like he maybe got hit, like slapped in the face by an extended arm, not intentional, of course. But then what happened was he grabbed his face to flop, landed on his shoulder, and hurt his shoulder. It's just, I'm a Daryl DK fan, but that is like probably the lowest moment of his career, like hurting his shoulder while flopping. So if they go out, Paul Ariola's already out. Reggie Cannon's been dealing with hamstring issues. This is already a shoestring squad. I'm worried about the team going forward.
So it's that defensive depth you think is the big concern going forward? Or are you
defensive depth, winger depth, and then we have midfielder depth, but they're not good players. So it's I don't think we're very strong anywhere. I'm worried, and I think that really Canada's 2 strikers both going off. I think if they both stay on, I think Canada wins.
And I think you're not alone in that. Stick Piano here popping in. He thinks that if Akinola had played the whole game, he would have connected on one of Buchanan's crosses and it would have ended in a draw. And I think that's, it's too bad when we see guys go off and, we have to think about, what could have happened? What could happen if this player was still healthy? But I'm just hoping that Akinola is not out for a significant period of time. I was excited to see him play. And I'm sure, just on a personal note, the player himself was probably extremely excited to play against the nation he just switched from. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of back and forth. It's not something that's super uncommon for us in the CONCACAF to see a player switch nationalities, but to see a striker that goes right into the top, he starts a game. That's not a common occurrence, I think. So it would have been really cool to be able to see him stay on and to see him, honestly, as a Canadian fan, score. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that I thought was really, really nice. We're going to throw a little bit of the COVID concern aside. We know that, there's rules in different states and there's rules in different countries on what's acceptable. But wasn't it really nice to see a pretty well full ground with a lot of fans being involved in a ground that honestly I think is a fantastic facility to play in? I thought it was really, really cool to see people along the banisters. There was a real energy in there. Obviously, it would have been nice if the borders were open and voyageurs and the Canadian fans could have flooded into a section somewhere in there. But what did you guys think of the energy? What did you guys think of the environment there? I thought it was really, really nice to see fans. I'll start with you, Benedict.
Yeah, it was awesome. Fans are the reason why people play the sport. So as we always get reminded by the players, and as we saw during the Euros as well, and then during this Gold Cup so far, like the atmosphere makes a huge difference. I think to just not only the players who have some extra motivation, but just the product on TV as well for people watching at home, having the atmosphere, it just makes it so much more enjoyable, and defense can influence the outcome of a game.
What do you think, Tobes? Did you enjoy the atmosphere? Did you enjoy the look?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Especially it's the Sporting KC crowd. Busio is their homegrown. He's the second youngest player to ever sign an MLS pro contract, or when he did, he was the second youngest behind Freddie Adu. So they were like shouting Busio every time he touched the ball, which was nice. I kind of think it got to his head a little bit. I wasn't actually that impressed with Busio in this game. He's a talented kid, but he looked like that. He looked like a talented kid against a bunch of men in the midfield. Kind of got scared of the occasion and simmered down. I'm not giving up on him. I think he's got a very high potential, but I don't think that was his best game. And I think the crowd might have had something to do with that.
I mean, it's different, right? Especially a lot of these athletes, especially if you're young, you've been training the last year and a half, you're used to being in empty grounds. You're used to being in empty stadiums. You're used to being able to hear your manager call out whatever they need to call out. I mean, there's been kind of a nice part of that as a spectator. You get to hear, exactly what is being said sometimes when a man is losing his mind at someone. But now you got sounds, you got crowds, you're trying desperately to get someone's attention across the field to give them an instruction. It's back to that. It must be a little bit of a change, and you're probably right that maybe the moment it was a little bit too much. And he's also playing, in a very supportive crowd. There's a little bit of pressure there. I'm sure he had friends and family who were in the crowd. Those things can happen. But if you were disappointed with Busio, Benedict, was there anyone that you were disappointed with on the Canadian side? Was there anyone that you were expecting more from?
Not overly disappointed. Junior Hoylett, I don't know if he is his best position as a center attacking midfielder. I think I don't know necessarily his fault though. I think if he was playing maybe wider, get some more of those crosses in, might have been more effectively used. But I don't think anyone in Canada was overly disappointing.
I think I would agree too. I think the only disappointing moment was the first 2 minutes of the game exactly. Where we looked like we were still just kind of having a chat and getting ready for a casual kickabout. But interesting you bring up Hoyet though, because it's something I did want to touch on. How often do we see it where a player comes over without a contract, jumps into a national team, and this guy's been around for a while. Like he left Cardiff. He's one of the players that inspired a lot of the youth in the Canadian program because he was sort of one of the first big Canadian players to truly, commit to this national program. Is it a little risky for him to be out there playing while he's also maybe looking for a job? Or do you think it's a matter of he's not got enough interest and he's trying to show that he wants more people interested? I'll start with you, Tobes. I know that this is a Canadian question, but I do like to alternate. So we'll go to you first.
Well, I remember seeing Junior Hoylett back in when I was playing FIFA as a young teen and seeing his card and being like, "There's a Canadian player on Blackburn in the Premier League." But I do think it's interesting. I'm not really aware of his club situation, that he didn't have a contract, but I think he's clearly talented, and I think that talent and experience mean a lot for the national team.
Benedict, what do you think? Is it risky for him to be out there playing? Is he playing for a contract right now, or is he trying to attract more suitors than he's getting? What do you think?
I think it's a good thing for him. I think he's putting himself in the shop window and in sort of a big environment, and performing for the national team is kind of the pinnacle of a player's career in some cases. And I think if he can do that without a contract, hopefully for him that'll sort of generate some interest. But also on the Canadian bench, Frank Stirring is also without a contract. The center back, he played in Germany, I believe, and same situation for him, I think.
It's really that's kind of, I always find that very interesting to me because it's one of those things where a player really has to kind of believe in what's going to happen in the tournament, how they're going to show, because if they get hurt, that could mean they miss a season because they're not going to get a contract in time. That's the risk, right? So it's interesting to see. Gold Cup look ahead. Obviously, we've got quarters coming up now. I haven't had a chance to take a peek at it. Do you guys know who? I'll ask you each. Tobes, who's America playing next? Do we know? Is there games left in the Gold Cup?
Yeah, so I think America and Canada are playing. America's playing whoever gets second, and Canada's playing whoever gets first. And the group that contains Costa Rica and Jamaica are probably the two teams that are going to get out.
Yeah.
So I guess the worry would be that the round after that, right, is basically whoever runs into Mexico would probably be the biggest concern for both of these clubs.
I think Canada's on the side of the bracket with Mexico. That was the United States' reward for winning the game, is not being on the same side of the bracket as Mexico. But, because they're angry about their Nations League loss. They brought almost their full A squad.
Yes, yeah, I know Mexico is scary. I mean, Mexico's always scary. So is that like, I guess that's the big hump. I mean, obviously Costa Rica or Jamaica will both be tough teams, but do you think that the Canadian fans, Canadian players are already looking past that matchup, Benedict, and looking at the Mexican team in that semi?
I don't know about looking past it because as we've seen with Canada so many times, they lost to Haiti, for example, in the 2019 tournament. So I don't know about looking past it, but I also think Canada isn't really bothered with who they play in the next round. I think the expectation and kind of the hope is that they'll just beat whoever they play. So I'm not sure if they're looking past it, but the expectation is definitely going into, I think it's on Sunday, the game, and with the one eye on the Mexico game for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Would you prefer, if you're as a Canadian fan, or a supporter, would you prefer Costa Rica or Jamaica, or does it truly not matter to you?
I don't think it matters to me. I think, like I said, I think the expectation for the players, the coaches, the fans is just they have to win either way, and whoever's in their way is in their way.
What about you, Topes? What are you looking forward? What are you worried about for the American team and the rest of this tournament?
The squad, like I said, I didn't like really a lot of the selections when it came out. A lot of players rejecting call-ups. So now the injuries, it's going to be, and with Greg having played 3 different formations in each of the 3 games, I think trying to figure out what his best tactic is, who his best players are. That's really what I'm looking forward to. I will say I'm more scared of Jamaica than Costa Rica. Costa Rica is obviously very experienced and talented, but I think their generation is getting pretty old. I think by this point in the tournament, they're probably on fumes right now, whereas Jamaica is more of an up-and-coming team that I think they've looked pretty good in their games. I think they've been pretty scary.
Here's an interesting thing. So I have been trying my best to get a lot of people overseas to watch the Gold Cup. Stay up late, watch these games, right? Copa America is fantastic, Euro's fantastic. You need to see CONCACAF. It's unique. It's different, right? Like it's something that's worth seeing. One of the things that's been a big turnoff, I think, for let's say European fans, is that like we're not seeing the A sides play here. And for them, they find that, I think a lot of the fans that I've talked to find that very weird. They find it very odd to cheer for a national team where you're in a tournament that apparently means a lot, but at the same time, you're also not playing your best players. And there's players, like you mentioned, who've declined call-ups. There's players who are injured, and there's also players who are being specifically rested for the World Cup qualifiers. Do you think that hurts the Gold Cup tournament and the eyes that go on it? Do you think it hurts the ability to kind of share this tournament with the rest of the world? Because I honestly think it's underwatched for what it means to this side of the world. I think it provides maybe not the highest quality football. If you're comparing it to the Euro, that's fine, but I love watching football. I love watching soccer, right? So if it's French Martinique versus Costa Rica, I really don't care. I'm happy to watch it. What do you think the Gold Cup could do in the future? Do you think it's just this year because of COVID? What do you think has made this tournament feel kind of, I don't know what the word would be, a little bit weird, a little bit secondary? I'll start with you, Tobes.
I do think it's a bit COVID related because if I'm remembering correctly, the Nations League was supposed to take place last year and that got delayed, which pushed it into this year. And I think with the Gold Cup, if the Gold Cup was happening when the Nations League was happening, then we would have seen the A sides. Really, with the Nations League, we only saw the United States of America and Mexico's A sides play one game, and then Honduras and Costa Rica were also there. I think that just kind of the way the calendar shook out this year, and then all the European-based players not really coming into the Gold Cup. I do think it's a bit COVID, but I also think that this isn't the first time this has happened with the Gold Cup. This isn't the first time I've seen the U.S. into like a B, C, D team to the Gold Cup. So I think they need to be smarter about how they schedule it.
What do you think, Benedict? Is the Gold Cup kind of feeling like a little bit of a secondary tournament this year? And is that just this year, or is that something that's always happened in the Gold Cup from your perspective?
Yeah, I also think this year's is partly because of COVID. Like a lot of teams had ended their seasons late. A lot of teams are already back in preseason, so that's affecting some players' eligibility or availability, I guess. But also generally for the Gold Cup, I think like Tobes mentioned, it's a little bit late in the summer. I think like it's getting to the point where some players would rather prioritize preseason with their club team than the national team, and I think by playing it right at the end of the season, or the club season would be probably optimal. But obviously with the Euros and the Copa America as well, you didn't want to clash with it too much because then I think probably Gold Cup is third on that list. terms of what most international fans would be interested in. And so I think it's partly because of this year, but also just generally something they should watch out for.
Thought from Stick Piano here in the chat. The Gold Cup is crazy for being held during league preseason. It ruins the tournament and leads to B-sides. And I think, that's basically the summary of what we're talking about here. But what do? Do you schedule against the Euro and the Copa America? Like, you schedule against the Copa America and where the international fans are going to be watching. They're going to be watching the Copa America. I mean, the names in that tournament are much, much, much bigger. And we can talk about how big some of the players are for Mexico and the States and Canada, but they're never going to have the star power of an Argentina or a Brazil, for example. Does there need to be maybe an effort to work with scheduling around those tournaments? Like, in the sense that I know Copa there's days where there's days off. Could they not stagger where you have Copa America one night and Gold Cup the next night and try to share the love a little bit? Or is that something that these organizations just don't do? Benedict, I'll start with you on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is both federations want sort of like the prime time games, I guess, like weekends and evenings, like Friday night kind of games. But I'm not sure how many people would tune in for Martinique and whoever on like a Monday evening. So I think that's probably part of the problem. But also, I think this year it's a different scenario because the Euros were also postponed from last year. If it was just Gold Cup and Copa America, maybe they should have and could have and should have started earlier. With the Euros, I think it probably was smart to delay it a little bit, but it did ultimately sort of affect the availability of some players.
What do you think, Tobes? Is there a way to get around this kind of you know what this feels like? And this is totally not a football related thing, but for those who are golf fans, for a long time, the Canadian major, the Canadian tour, was right after, I believe it was either the Masters or the US Open. It was right after a major. And so no one would go because it was the next tournament. You wanted to take a break after a major. And so Canada had to spend a lot of time basically harassing the schedulers to try and move it to another point, at which point it became more popular and some of those big names came. Like, it just seems to me like it's a scheduling conundrum, frankly, because there's just so much going on. There's so many tournaments. And at the end of the day, CONCACAF will have to deal with the fact that they are sort of the minnow in a sense, in comparison to the other federations, and the ability to garner audience and bring excitement towards a tournament. Do you think that could change in the future as Canada, States, maybe some of these other countries continue to grow? I'll go with you, Tobe, to start.
I think it's, I think we can maybe overtake Asia as maybe Africa as a qualifying region, but I think we're shooting way too high if we're trying to match Europe or South America, which are the two tournaments that the Gold Cup would have competed with this summer, the Euros and the Copa America. But with the Gold Cup normally happening on odd years and the Euros normally happening on the even years where there's not a World Cup, I think this was kind of a one-time, that specific scheduling issue is kind of a one-time thing. But again, I don't remember exactly why, but this isn't the first time it's happened. So clearly they're not prioritizing it.
And I think probably the other part of this, and Benedict, you can confirm if this is right, but also the schedules from different leagues in CONCACAF also don't align. There isn't a general understanding of how those seasons align. Canadian Premier League runs at a particular time, the MLS runs at a particular time. I don't think they all line up. So it causes that same kind of issue. Is this just something that CONCACAF basically lives with, Benedict, and it's a matter of trying to optimize that schedule every year the best they can?
Yeah, I think the problem with that is, or the thing that you're kind of.
Oh, we lost you there a bit there, Benedict.
Sorry. So it's in like the MLS and the Canadian Premier League are kind of a summer season, and you kind of lose the opportunity to have both, or sort of have a gap in one for the other one. Yeah. I think that kind of affects it a little bit because there are people who are big club fans but don't necessarily care about the national teams, or vice versa. And I think that's probably part of the problem as well. Is you need to find a way to sort of have them intertwined without seriously interrupting the other one.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that I like to explore because I'm constantly trying to drag my Irish, English, German, whoever fans to be like, come on, let's watch like Surreyman and whoever's playing tonight. Like, why not? And they're just like, who? Right? Like, you know what I mean? It's tough to bring them in, but I'm never going to stop. I think CONCACAF offers a unique experience. There's matchups here you don't see. I mean, we even have a country that's not technically a country according to FIFA that competes in CONCACAF. Like, it's a unique place, and I think there's a lot that's that could sell it. Whether or not it's the quality that people are looking for, then you're not maybe not going to get into it. But I like, where else are you going to see some of these insanely long penalties at the end of the game? Where else are you going to see some of these, the officiating change, the standard change from game to game, where one thing's a foul and the next time it's nothing. Get up, right? So I don't know. I think it's got a lot to offer, and I'm going to continue to be that stubborn.
In that U.S. Mexico game, you got to see like the players playing dodgeball with the fans, which is something that you don't get to see in Europe. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, unique changes there for sure. So I'm just trying to think about if there was anything else I wanted to pick your minds on. I've really appreciated you guys coming on here today. This has been fantastic.
I did see a comment from Stick Piano earlier asking about maybe who, if Akinola and Laren and Zimmerman and DK are injured, what kind of, now that the Gold Cup has said we can call up replacements, kind of looking into maybe who could accept the call-ups for those kind of positions.
I mean, here's a question. I mean, can we call up David Benedict? Is that even a thing? I don't think so, right? Because he's probably focused on his season now. Who would we call up? I'll start with you, Benedict. If there were injuries to Akinola, who were some of the first, players that come to mind as possible replacements?
Well, I think the fun one, the sort of banter one, would be Daniel Jebison from Sheffield United. He's been with an England youth camp recently, but he's from Oakville, Ontario, I believe. So I don't think he's going to be quite ready to commit to Canada yet, but he was in that provisional roster, I believe. The more likely one would be Tesho Akindele. That's one I believe Oliver Platt from One Soccer just tweeted out not long ago, and I can definitely agree with that. I think he's been a national team regular to some extent, and probably one of the better available options. Fairly close to where the tournament is taking place at the moment.
Sounds great. Tobes, for your injuries, is there anybody is in your head? I know you were pretty deep down on that center back depth list there. Are you hoping that maybe some of these guys who declined call-ups could?
That's the hope. I'll start with DK because that's a little bit easier. When Greg called this roster together, he called up 5 center forwards and 1 winger as our forwards. So if DK's out, I wouldn't bother trying to replace him with another striker. I would look at MLS wingers that would accept the call up. Pulisic and Brendan Aronson, and Weah, those guys wouldn't accept the call up because they're in preseason. But either Chris Mueller or Cade Cowell. Cade Cowell, really talented duo national, 17-year-old. I would like to try to get him in, get him cap tied because I think his ceiling's pretty high, and he's good now. He's the only player in MLS with I think 4 goals and 4 assists, at least 4 goals and 4 assists right now. So I bring one of those two. For the center backs, I mean, John Brooks, Chris Richards, Mark McKenzie, Matt Miazga will not accept call-ups. Cameron Carter-Vickers and Eric Palmer-Brown already rejected call-ups. Then you have 3 guys that are here. What was that?
Omar Gonzalez.
Omar Gonzalez, yeah, his corpse. We can drag his corpse around. Maybe like someone like Justin Glad from New York Red Bulls. I wouldn't be happy with. I mean, we're just so far on the depth chart. None of these people are really that good, no matter who you pick. Probably Justin Glad, maybe. It'd probably be Justin Glad.
So it sounds to me like it sounds like the American team is going to be scraping the barrel a little bit.
Yeah, I see Stick just put Tim Ream in the chat. I assume at Fulham he would also reject the call up. So
always try.
Another one.
Try. One thing I liked here is Sunday Driver dropping in. Let's just kidnap Tamori. And of course Grunge is a Milan fan, and he's like, hey, we just bought this guy, like, please come on. Here's what I noticed from both of you though is that you both were like, would be really great is nabbing these guys who don't have a cap yet and getting them locked into a cap while we have the opportunity, right? Like the Sheffield United kid, he looks fantastic, and I have a buddy who's a Sheffield United fan. I actually didn't know much about him until he stepped onto that game and really kind of turned heads earlier this year. And then I was like, oh boy, we need to steal him from the English somehow, please. Because, that's our play sometimes over here, right? You have those dual nationalities and you see a guy who's maybe not getting the time that they want, getting the looks that they need. They're stuck in that under 23 side. You go, hey, come play for Canada. We got a Gold Cup going on right now. We could get you into lineup right now. Let's go, right? So big thank you guys for coming on to the show today. I really, really appreciated this conversation. It was really enjoyable. I learned a lot. Before we go, I always like to give our guests an opportunity to, talk a bit about what they're doing, what they're working on, and plug any shows or anything that they're working on. So, Tobes, I'll start with you. What are you up to these days, and where can people connect with you?
I've been busy moving around, supporting my spouse through her clerkships in medical school. But I just got back to my apartment, so I think the streaming is going to start soon. I've been doing a full America save where you on Football Manager where you can only buy Americans, and I just somehow won the Premier League by cheating, or I don't know how I did it. There's something went wrong. Something went horribly wrong for every other team in the league. So I think I'll hope to get back on that soon.
And that's at twitch.tv/TobesLeroney, I believe,
yes,
correct?
That's correct.
I'll drop a link on in either Twitter, or you guys can always ask me on Discord, and I'll be happy to shoot you over a link.
Thanks,
Benedict. Steve. Where can people find you, and what are you up to these days? You have a lot in your bio, so I'll let you break it down.
my main role at the moment, I'm with canpl.ca, the official website of the Canadian Premier League, doing a lot of coverage about that league. Also, obviously, the Gold Cup at the moment. The women's national team start the Olympics on Wednesday morning, so there'll be a lot of coverage around that. And follow me on Twitter at BTFR17, and be happy to provide some quality content.
Well, I appreciate you both so much for being here. We'll definitely have to drag you guys back on again when there's another opportunity to do so. This has been fantastic. But thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. And just again, really appreciate your time and dealing with a little bit of the hiccups as I learn how to do this. So appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scoot.
So there we are. That was a really great discussion around the Gold Cup game, CONCACAF, a little bit of U.S. men's national team and the Canadian men's national team. So big thank you to everybody who's been hanging out in chat. The poutines are dropping in chat, which we love very much. So the next part of the show, I'm going to be bringing on a friend of mine, and we're going to be talking about something a little bit more serious. We're going to be talking about the scandal happening in the National Hockey League right now around the Chicago Blackhawks. For those, I'm going to go ahead and just throw out a content warning. If you are uncomfortable with conversation around sexual assault, sexual violence, this may not be the segment for you. We are going to be diving into a little bit of a serious conversation here. So without any further ado, let's bring in my friend Dan. Dan, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me all right?
We are good. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump in with me today.
No problem. Sorry, I'm a little dim. One of my ring lights blew out this morning, so apologies for that. I look a little corpsey, but it's all good.
That's okay. I haven't even turned my light on. It gets too warm. It's just too warm.
But yeah, Scoots, thanks for having me on. I'm excited. I've got some notes here, and gonna see what there's lots to talk about for sure in regards to the Blackhawks and what they've done. But let's get started.
Yeah. So Dan, let's just do a little bit of an intro for those who don't know you. Dan and I have been friends for a very long time. This man, his main job has been a little bit on hold due to COVID, but it's starting to creep back out. But this man's an entertainer, travels around the world, does all sorts of, is circus the right word? A little bit of...
Yeah, acrobatics. Basically, if you don't mind me jumping in, Scoots, it's my wife and I perform a 2-person acrobatic show around the world, and we call ourselves a low-budget Cirque du Soleil. So that's pretty much how we sell it.
Yeah, it's very, very, very cool. And on the side of that, insane hockey fan, has organized hockey teams, including some tournaments overseas. He's been a massive hockey fan in Winnipeg for a very, very long time, and I thought it would be a really good opportunity to bring in somebody that I know that we may not always agree on how we see things, and that's always something I think is fantastic when you bring people on a show, right?
Spice of life.
Spice of life. Grunge, I could definitely hook you up. There's actually a question right off the bat here. So Grunge is wondering if there's any videos of you guys performing. There absolutely is. And we'll Grunge, if you want to drop me a note, or I'll try to remember, I'll send you some links later. Dan can send me over
just
a couple
drop
of
drop the website in chat really quick if that's okay with you, Scoots. Okay, there you go. Thank you kindly.
There you go. So turning from something fun and exciting like a street circus to something quite concerning. I've been watching this story grow, and for those who aren't familiar with it, I'll just kind of do a little bit of a summary. The Chicago Blackhawks, a professional hockey team, play in the National Hockey League. They've been around. They're one of the original 6 franchises in the NHL, so they have an incredibly storied history and are very well known. So what happened is a story broke earlier this year that there was basically assaults that occurred in the summer of 2010. Basically, when this team was competing in the playoffs, competing at some of the highest level tournaments that this league offers. There's been accusations and now a lawsuit that's been brought forward by a couple of players. I believe they're both not named John Doe officially in the documents.
Yeah, they are.
That being said, we're just going to try and not mention who they are just because there is pretty clear everybody knows who they are, but I don't want to if they're identifying themselves as John Doe, we'll just leave it at that. But basically what happened is these two guys were taken advantage of by a fitness coach, and it was basically an open secret. This is the part that really bothers me, is that this was something that almost every player knew about, the trainers knew about, and the management and the team knew about. And it was brought up to the management group by a trainer who said, we need to go to the police. And that manager was told that we're not going to do that. And this trainer suddenly disappeared from his job and was quietly moved away from the organization. So before we
given a letter of reference, which is insane,
and given a letter of reference by the organization. And now his current job, which has just come out earlier today, he is managing a business where he continues to bring in young men as interns from schools. And this is something that a lot of people are saying is incredibly dangerous, and is you're feeding someone who unfortunately has experienced grooming children of this age, young men, and taking advantage of them. And before we even get into the discussion, my biggest problem with this is that the NHL, for those, I know a lot of people don't follow the NHL, but they spent millions and months on an investigation into the Arizona Coyotes because they worked out draftees too early. In this case, they've practically done very little in terms of what the NHL has talked about.
I don't think they've done almost anything, to be completely fair.
Completely, and Dan's nailing it on the head. They haven't done anything. So I've ranted for a little bit. I've kind of set what we're going to talk about. Dan, are you feeling the kind of same sense of disgust?
I mean, it's just so, it's just so evident, and the fact remains too that I believe that everyone knows the coach is Aldrich, Brad Aldrich. He went after he finished with the Blackhawks to Miami University and was convicted of abusing another minor within almost a year of his dismissal from the Blackhawks. Like, this is not somebody who had a lapse in judgment. This is a continued, repeated pattern of abuse by a person in power that is largely going unchecked. And Scoots, you know as much as I do that that hockey is a game of skill. It's a game of teamwork, but there's a camaraderie and a essence in hockey that it's always everything you do, whether you're a coach, a player, a manager, a prospect, is for the greater good of the team, no matter what it is. And most of the times that is an amazing way to play a team sport and to be in a team. But this is one of those times where that is a complete failure of administration. And if you're going to touch on SOPA later, which I assume we will, I don't want to go too much into it, but I can't begrudge the players as much for it as I can the rest of the coaches and management. I
think I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Because the managers and the administration of the team set the tone. They set what's acceptable. And they're also the ones who are responsible for ensuring that there's supports for these players. Supports where people can go and talk about something that might be uncomfortable. They talk about an issue, or just need to be able to talk to a doctor about something that's going on at home. Like, we know that sports has evolved to the point where, the mental health is just as important as the physical health, right?
Correct.
So this occurred in a time where, it occurred in 2010. I would say that in the past 10 years, that type of conversation around mental health has accelerated quite drastically. and it's sad to say, but I don't think that people would feel as safe talking about this in 2010 as maybe they do now in 2020 or 2021.
No.
But I think what was most upsetting was reading about the meeting that went up where they sat down with the general managers, the assistant general managers. The trainer basically made the case and they said no, but they didn't do anything about it. See, the point, that's where the administration began to fail. They had an opportunity to open an internal investigation. They had an opportunity to do to suspend him while they did that investigation. They had a number of opportunities, and what they did was they chose to do absolutely zero about it, and then basically politely give the guy another job with a nice referral.
Yeah, and not only that, but like again, it wasn't like the dome doesn't cover all the coaches and management. Like Paul Vincent, who is the skills coach for the Blackhawks in their first cup run, 2 players approached Coach Vincent about what had happened, and the skills coach went to the management and said, "We got to do this. You should go to the police, and I'm willing to testify." And management pushed him aside as well. So we're not talking about even the coaching staff at this point. We're talking about like the top tier brass of the Blackhawks. And if you as a player, especially a young player, go to your coach, somebody that you trust on your team, somebody that you feel in 2010, like you said, it's come a long way in the last decade plus. In 2010, that you feel like I can have this conversation, something really screwed up has happened. I trust this coach. I'm going to say it. And then that coach goes to management, and management pushes away. Like, what power do you have as a player? And like, yeah, it's just, I hope today, given how far things are pushing, like you said, with the acknowledgement of mental health and mental health awareness, and especially with the stance the league is taking on it, like we could easily, again, not for the same reasons, but we could easily have another Rick Rippon or Derek Bugard by somebody who has to repress these feelings for so long, and who ends up feeling powerless, and who ends up feeling ostracized, and the only way that they can control themselves is by taking, the only way that they feel they can have control of their life is by saying, I can't deal with this anymore. I've got the power to do this, and it's just that cyclical inability of management to really just, throw their own guys under the bus that needed to be run over is just an absolute disgrace.
What I think is truly too upsetting is that when it gets up to that level, you talk about these organizations, and we talk about the tenets of sport, really. I mean, it's hockey or whatever it is. It's camaraderie, it's teammanship. It's, this becomes an extension of your family. I still know lots of guys that I played hockey with, and you see them, they're going to yell out, my last name, because no one speaks first name to each other when you play hockey.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know them for a long, long time. You build this extended family. And to think that, as you move up, those tenets and those values seem to slowly kind of fade away, because especially as you move up into the NHL and this conversation moves up to that, executive management level, their first conversation is, how is this going to make the team look?
Yeah,
who's going to get it? And it's just like, that's the wrong way to think. It really should have been, what can I do to support this team? What can I do to support my brothers? What can I do to make this team feel safe and a good, and as an employer, what can I do as an employer to ensure that my place of employment is a safe place to work? Like,
yeah, right.
It's shocking to me that this is something where we're still seeing stories come out. And I have to give a big, thank you to Rick Westhead from TSN, who's continually covered this story and is willing to do things and cover stories that, do their best to try and stay away from any sort of light.
Mm-hmm. It's, and also too, like, the spider web of that team runs deep. Like, let's be honest, who was on that team in management? Mark Bergevin, Kevin Cheveldayoff. Like, these are names that we know, and most of us in Winnipeg especially love, like, where, and just to think, we've been fortunate enough to have our team back for 10 seasons now, and at least in Winnipeg, the image of Cheveldayoff and Paul Maurice is that they embody the city that's hardworking. It's the long plan. They're calculated, very, very calculated, very sorry, I'm lacking the word here, but they're not afraid to make difficult decisions.
Mhm.
And so you wonder, like, did they have the knowledge that this was going on? And you know, again, the spider web goes for miles in hockey. Hockey's a small world,
Mhm.
and it's especially sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish off,
Yeah,
Scoot.
I was just gonna say, like, you're nailing it right there. It is truly a spider web of this incredibly small family. Like, professional hockey players, for those who don't know, it's not like, you know, soccer or football. Like, it's not in the sense that there's teams everywhere, there's jobs everywhere. There's a certain amount of leagues where you can make a career playing, and then that's pretty much it. You know, most guys, teams are big enough. You have 25, 30 guys who play on a team, and you get to know guys. Even if you played with them for 2 to 3 years, I can mention all the guys I know who went into some professional rank and played. And I would hope that they're taken care of and supported and protected from people like this, right? I think what really grinds my gears about this too is the fact that it's been quiet for so long. That, you know, you talked a bit about we don't want to grind on the players. You're right. I don't want to grind on the players, but at the same time, there's so many avenues they could have anonymously reported this.
Yeah.
Knowing that it was an open secret, knowing that your teammate was abused, knowing that your employer has hidden this from happening.
Yeah.
The NHLPA has anonymous ways of reporting these things. The police have anonymous ways of reporting these things. But everybody was so afraid of probably what that effect of that. If you're known as the guy who outed it in the hockey family, that has another effect too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess to me, like, the power imbalance, like, not every player is a Sidney Crosby or a Blake Wheeler or you know, Steven Stamkos or Kucherov or whatever, right? Not every player has that power. So if I'm a third liner, fourth liner, I'm making, I don't know, double league minimum salary, so 1.5 mil a year. I've had a great season. I'm in contract talks. You know, I really have a hard time because it's like there's to put it into a personal perspective. There's a lot of times where we get booked for shows and clients, and they're like, these are your circumstances, and then we arrive to perform and the circumstances have entirely changed. And you don't want to be the person who's like, hey, you said the stage was going to be 20 feet by 40 feet. Now it's 10 feet by 10 feet. I don't know if I can do this safely, because you know that's going to look bad and they're going to hire somebody else. You'll be, you know, like there's always more people coming up, and like, I get it. I've been there, not with anything quite of this magnitude, but like the stage example is one. And if I feel like that as a circus performer, you know, making a one client contract, I cannot imagine the feeling of you push your whole life and you get to the NHL, and again, you're a third liner, maybe a fourth liner. Do you really want to, like you said, you don't want to be that guy in the family who's like, because somebody is just going to go and take that opportunity that you've been given. Which is why, to me personally, I mean, yes, it would take a strong voice from the players to stand up, but I can definitely, I don't want to say justify or not even understand, but I know that what that pressure feels like in a very small situation. I can't even begin to understand what it would feel like in a situation of that magnitude.
And I mean, it's the reality is, and this is an interesting conversation just from the chat. Sir Grun just added a couple of comments, which I'll go through. So he's from Sweden. He coaches football, soccer. But obviously, if you're from Sweden, there's also going to be lots of athletes who also play hockey. So he's had the fortune to babysit and develop both, you know, kind of see both. And he thinks that it's unique to a lot of these issues are unique to hockey, because the pressure of hockey is, just as you mentioned up as a third line player, it is incredibly easy to replace you.
Yeah.
Incredibly easy for you to be missed and forgotten and dropped off and moved away. So you're nailing it a bit on the head there, I think, Dan. Is it not only is it the fear of obviously you want to do something right, but if it affects your career and your trajectory negatively to the point where you may not ever have a chance to break into the NHL again, of course that's going to sit over your head like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to call this out. And I think the conversation and the comments you're getting from some of the players who were there, the one that really stuck out to me was Oh goodness, I'm the guy, the defenseman who was just traded to Edmonton. Remind me, Patrick or
Just traded to Edmonton.
I'll find his name. Anyway, he had pointed out, his comment would basically was, it's unfortunate what happened. I wish it was handled better, but then basically kind of said that he had faith in the team to do what's right. And I think that's totally playing the safe card, which is, I know it was wrong. I didn't feel I could do anything. I hope the people who are truly responsible for these sorts of things does the right thing.
It's so delicately worded, like, and there's a lot of that. You know, you look at, you know, it's the hockey view turned up to, hockey interview turned up to 11. You know, where you're saying a lot of words, you're being personable, but you're not saying anything at all. You know what I mean? Like, but there's definitely more between the lines in that quote that you mentioned earlier, for sure. Reading between the lines, absolutely.
And here's the problem that I have. It's not with the players who didn't do anything. It's not necessarily, you know, the reporters who maybe chose to keep this quiet because they wanted to keep access. It's the fact the NHL, now knowing this, hasn't done anything. Yeah,
Duncan Keith,
thank you.
Duncan Keith, because I actually just pulled up just to go on the that quote that you mentioned. Keith said the exact same thing. He said this just after he was traded to Edmonton. He said it's a very important subject and something that's becoming, there's more awareness in the world right now. And for me, I'd rather not get into anything like that in terms of my memories of it and what happened. It's been a long time, and I realize that people want answers. I hope one way or another things work out for the best with that situation. The team gets it sorted out, and there's some way to move on for everybody. It's exactly the same. It's like, you read that, you're like,
his lawyer crafted part of it, I'm sure.
But
I don't want to become part of the lawsuit in a sense, right?
But like, you read something like that and you're like, absolutely players knew. Like, just like 100%. You're like, I'd rather not get into anything like that in terms of my memories of that and what happened. You know, like, that's me. To me, I'm hearing a guy who probably remembers something, but doesn't want to be drawn into or asked or being subpoenaed into this lawsuit because he's a current player in the NHL. Yeah,
he's no longer part of Chicago now. He's been moved. He doesn't want to deal. And there's a part of me that gets that from a personal level. Yeah, and then there's also a part of me that goes, "Come on, man! Like, you're near the end of your career. Just stand up and say it. Like, you paid your money."
Well, no, you're not wrong. And again, like, what we're talking about here is we're not talking about like a young kid like Kirby Doc coming into the Blackhawks. We're talking about Duncan Keith, you know, and who knows?
36. Yeah, I can't remember.
He's I don't know. He's around our age, so yeah, somewhere in there. But what's that?
A vet for sure.
A vet, yes. a storied individual in the NHL. But he, you know, and who knows what the pressures are on him? Who knows what Bowman or anyone has said to him, and just being like, you know, like, you talk, it's like, you know, it could be that, like, the camera's on him, and then behind the camera, somebody's just like, you know what I mean? Like, exactly. Like, we just don't know. And you see Duncan Keith saying something like that, and it's just like, what hope does that prospect have? You know what I mean?
I that's the thing that worries me a bit, is I hope the next generation of players, and I think we're seeing it. I think you can see the young guys feel more comfortable just saying what they think.
Yeah, for sure.
And challenging things when they don't, when they have an issue. I had a guest on earlier on the first episode. We talked a bit about how empowered NBA players are. Like, NBA players can basically go to an owner and go, "No, I don't like that. I'm not going to play until you do this." Right? NHL players could use a bit more player power. And I think if there was a bit more player power in the NHL, this wouldn't have sat for 10 years.
No, I think you're 100%. Like, you nailed it. Like, again, the idea, it's a pervasive idea in the NHL that, you know, everything is the greater good. Everything is for the greater good of the team. And if you're not for the greater good of the team, then you're not going to be on the team. Yeah. So
and it leads to toxic decisions because you're protecting the team.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I think that mantra is part of hockey. I think it's essential to part of hockey.
I agree. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not this all-encompassing rule that only does good. There's times where it's used to protect people it should not be protecting.
Well, like I said, even in the very, very minor and base levels that we played in, Scoot, once you played with a certain group for some time, it's you go to a very, very, very low stakes version of war with them. You know what I mean? And it creates this brotherhood, and 99% of the time, that is 100% what you need. And we're looking at that 1% right here where it's not. And the other thing that another thing that bothers me about it, Scoots, and you'll touch on this I'm sure as well, is that like you said, the NHL hasn't said anything, but we've seen the NHL, especially in the past half decade, be ramming this PR campaign, which is good, of you can play, you are empowered, hockey for all colors, the Diversity Alliance that Ryan Reeves and Evander Kane and Matt Dumba were like, the NHL is shoving all this stuff down, but they're like, they're talking out of the mouth that has one foot in the other side, is what I feel like. And that weakens their message, that weakens their good messages of, if you're LGBTQ, if you're a visible minority, if you have a, if you stand up for BLM or what, push against inequality publicly, we'll support you. But not if a coach uses a power dynamic to sexually assault you, then, I'm sorry, you're on your own.
Wash our hands. That might affect our dollars, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of those PR campaigns, and the big concern, I think, at Diversity Alliance, who you mentioned, who, for those who don't know, is a group of colored players who've come together to try and push some of the concerns that they have, and there is many. Hockey is not unique to any other sport. There's concerns, there's issues, and there's things that are being worked through. But what I think the NHL is trying to get across, is that hockey is accessible, it's open, anyone can play, right?
Yes.
But as soon as you see a story like this, and it doesn't vibe. Either you walk the walk while you talk the talk, or you talk the talk until it no longer serves you, and you just become really a soulless corporate entity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a huge criticism of the NHL for a very long time. I mean, we as being Canadians, we have a different view on how hockey should be treated, where it should be played, the type of country, places that should have hockey in it. And I don't think that you and I, or most Canadian fans, were like, you know what, we need to get hockey in Florida. We need to get hockey into the desert.
Yeah, California and Florida should have 5 teams between the two. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
But that being said, there's been success with a lot of those things that I haven't agreed with. So I'm not the marketing guy, but at the end of the day, if hockey wants to come out of this looking like a sport that supports its athletes, that does what it says, and supports the players that have brought forward issues like they say they do, there needs to be an investigation from the NHL side. There needs to be some sort of public acknowledgement that this happened, and there needs to be some sort of something done about Aldridge and the fact that he's still able to operate out there working with kids on a day-to-day basis from recommendations and references he has from NHL clubs, which is ridiculous. And
he's been involved in university and high school hockey throughout the southern U.S. without pause since 2013, since the last time. I'm not sure if that was the last time that he was accused of assaulting another minor, but that was 7 years ago. And as we've said earlier, this is a pattern of behavior that hasn't stopped from hockey's highest level down to university and high school programs. If being in the NHL doesn't get you to really reevaluate and seek some help for what might be an addiction or some kind of behavioral disorder, what hope do these kids have in the southern U.S. where they're trying to grow hockey from the ground up?
It's really unfortunate. I think you and I we've talked about it. At the end of the day, there needs to be something done either from the Blackhawks side or the owner's side or the NHL side. I don't really care who it is. And if it's not them, why hasn't the Chicago police opened an investigation to have a conversation with these guys? It's one of those things where more could be done, and right now it just feels like it's being conveniently brushed under the bed, and people are hoping that that's where people will remember it.
Yeah, just as you said, the police, like as a final little exclamation point on how crazy all this is. Just checking my notes here, the police had been alerted to all of these assaults from 2012. Actually, the last one was filed in Miami in 2018 and gets forwarded to a police department, and then just does not gain any traction. So I assume you can only surmise that there's a backroom deal somewhere, like university or high school, calling the police and being like, listen, this guy worked with the Blackhawks, and they go, oh, okay. You know, it just
seems like it's one of those things where people are, this is a mess you don't want to get into.
Exactly.
And they're protecting it that way. But anyway, we can move on from this conversation. I think we can move on to some other things that are happening in the NHL. Yeah. One of the things actually broke earlier today, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it because I think on the flip side of this story, it's incredibly positive and something I'm really excited to read about. And it's cool because Stick Piano actually just dropped it into the chat here. Have we talked about Prokop? So I don't know if you saw the story yet today, Dan, but a draftee who's going into his first NHL camp, Prokop, has come out as openly gay, which I think is unbelievably positive.
Nashville Predators, yep.
By far overdue in every sport. We need people to be more comfortable walking into rooms, dressing rooms, and it not being a place that's just filled with toxic masculinity. Like at the end of the day, we talk about family, talk about brotherhood, and part of that is accepting people for who they are. So I'm really excited. So big. If I could, I know he's not watching, but Prokop, big round of applause, buddy.
For real, absolutely. That's and the great thing about this too, it's like on the flip side, just like you said, as the league progresses, we know there are gay NHLers right now. We know it. There are
100%.
There are definitely like more than a handful. And who knows, this kid coming out, I think he's 20, 19 or 20, something like that. Yeah. He comes out, and he just says, look, I'm going to go try to play for the Nashville Predators. I'm gay. Let's go. And, how crazy would it be, again, if one of the big names in hockey, after a couple more kids do this, and, like you said, a big name is winding their career down, they said, by the way, I was also gay. Whole career. Nobody nobody treated me any differently. I was gay the whole time. You get that toxic masculinity, like, oh, they're staring at my genitals in the shower. Like, that never happened. Like,
it's not a thing. That is just things that homophobes say to make a locker feel unsafe. And it's locker room, I should say, not a locker.
Yeah.
But you and I, we played lots of hockey. We know that there was guys on our team who later in life came out as gay or felt comfortable later in life being honest about who they were attracted to.
For sure.
Did it affect anything how I felt about them? Absolutely. Would I not want to play a sport with them? No, I still want to play. It doesn't change a freaking thing for me. At the end of the day, my biggest concern is how committed are you to the team? How committed are you to play the right way? Are you going to show up in practice? Are you going to be part of the team? I don't give a flying. I'll say it. I don't give a flying fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
You are attracted to. I really don't care. At the end of the day, it's about your personality and who you are as a person, and your sexuality has absolutely nothing to do with whether you're a good
and especially as a younger player, where you have everything to lose, being authentic to who you are is an incredible display of character and strength. And to me, if I'm on the Nashville Predators, and I see, and I'm 23, I've played for a couple of years, and I see this kid do that, I'm like, why would I not want somebody with that conviction of character and that like fortitude and strength to come and play? Not in, and again, the market is even challenging. Like, they're not in Vancouver, they're not in Los Angeles, they're not in New York, they're in Nashville, Tennessee. And yes, Nashville is cosmopolitan, but it is still in the American South, where a lot of people have not, come to terms with the way the world is going. And it's just, even in that market, like, that's a teammate that I would want 100%.
Here's the first thing I said to Hannah actually about it. I said, if I'm a hockey player is a lot about toughness. It's a little bit about being brash. It's a little bit about aggressiveness and the ability to go into tough places. And you're telling me that you're not going to look up to a guy who just turned to the world and said, "Hey, I'm gay. You have to deal with it. I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm going to go play hockey." There's a guy who's epitomizes the type of leader you want in a room.
Oh, for sure. Like, again, that fortitude, that strength, like that's more than getting crushed in a corner. Like it's immeasurable. It's immeasurable. The amount of
you and I are lucky. We're not in the sense that we're straight men. We haven't gone through that challenge. We don't know what it's like to have to pretend to be somebody else around your friends or family and your employer. Like when he said it, his quote today, and I don't know it right, like the quote word for word, but basically he said, I don't have to worry about it anymore. Like I'm off lifting this because now I don't have to walk into every room and wonder, who knows? Does that guy know? Does this guy know? He's done. It's up to everyone else to deal with it now. He's just there to work.
Yeah, and actually, I just pulled up the announcement here. One of the most poignant parts of it is he just says, "I'm no longer scared to hide who I am. Like, I can just be, again, my authentic self. I believe that living my authentic life will allow me to bring my whole self to the rink and improve my chances of fulfilling my dreams. And if I'm Nashville and if I'm the league, I'm like, dude, you like going back to if I'm the NHL in the league, pure dollars and cents, this guy is going to be my spokesperson. This guy is somebody who is, like we said earlier, talking the talk, but walking the walk and isn't afraid to do it. If I'm Gary Bettman or whoever's marketing, like in charge of league-wide marketing and high up there, I'm like, listen, Pro Cup, if you want to be in the spotlight like this, you're it. So let's go.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting is it's kind of an opportunity in two places. It's you're addressing one thing, which is everyone can play. It's something you've been on for a long, long time. It's a lot of organizations outside of the NHL have been pushing and pushing and pushing, doing a lot of great work in communities to get to the point where, a guy can feel comfortable saying this. And what's also great is it just removes the weight off his shoulders. It shouldn't be his responsibility to deal with other people's feelings about his sexuality.
Nope.
It's 100% not his. It shouldn't be anyone's problem.
Yeah,
right.
If it bothers you, that is entirely on you. You know what I mean? Like that's it. Take ownership of it and be done.
I'm excited. I think we saw the NFL player who revealed that he was openly gay earlier this year. We're now seeing an NHL player who's young. I would love to see in the next couple of years some established players 5-6 years into a career come out and feel comfortable being themselves, because you'd have to think that would be a load off them too, right? Like it's almost like you kind of have two lives.
It eats you up inside. It absolutely does. To repress that such a strong sense of who you are, and to have to shelve it around these people who, like we've been saying, are supposed to be your brothers and going to war with them every night. To not be that, it's draining. So yeah, I would love it if like some well-established player came out and just said, it was like, by the way, me too. Like, hey, how great would that be?
Yeah, I thought it was. I just wanted to talk about it. I know we hadn't. I outlined that as a topic for today, but it just broke, and I thought, wow, what a. We're going to talk a little bit about something heavy. Let's break it up with a little bit something light, something enjoyable, something that we're really excited about. Thinking of exciting things coming up, Dan, we know there's an expansion draft coming up. A unique, scary, stressful time that hockey fans are having to deal with relatively regularly lately, where a new team joins in. The owner spends $500 million plus on a franchise, and they get a custom-made expansion draft format that ensures that they get a playoff-ready team the first year they're in. And I want to say, there's lots of stories around here. The first one I kind of wanted to chat with you about, Dan, I thought was incredibly shocking. Price not being protected by the Montreal Canadiens. If I'm Ron Francis and I'm at Seattle Kraken and I see a franchise established star, possibly all-star keeper available, why wouldn't you follow the same format as Golden Knights and take a keeper like that?
Well, the contract is massive, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in addition to his contract, that the Kraken would also be responsible for paying his bonuses, his
11
performance
million
bonus. Yes.
due later this summer.
So I guess what Mark Bergevin is hoping is that he is banking on the fact that the Kraken, having just signed Chris Dreiger, I believe, they just signed him for 3 years.
Yep.
That they are not going to take that money. But that being said, Francis is allowed that he said that they are going and have the have been given the green light to spend the cap. So they're not going to get a budget team. So, but are they going to, there's too many, there's way too many players out there that are just like, Tarasenko is out there. Eberle is out there.
Domi.
Domi is out there. Mark Giordano is out there. Like, this is not the ragtag crew that Vegas assembled. That everyone thought Vegas was going to be. Like, this is not a team of third liners with a couple second liners sprinkled in. There is some top tier, S tier talent. But again, being said, we don't know. The Kraken have not revealed any of the details, like if they've been in negotiations with other teams. And I certainly hope that they're in negotiations with the Jets, because I would not like to lose Dylan DeMello.
Yeah, there was a big for those who are Jets fans, there was a big debate about who we would protect. So in the expansion draft, you're only able to protect a certain number of players, and there's different combinations of players: forwards, defense, keeper, like goaltenders. I want to say keepers, but you can only protect a certain amount of them. And so Winnipeg had a choice of either basically protecting a young guy they drafted in the first round, Stanley,
up and comer,
versus a guy who is honestly the analytical guys. They love this guy. Dylan DeMello is one of those players that is on a reasonable contract, and he goes out there and he plays consistently good 5-on-5 hockey. He's a good penalty killer, and he's effective on the power play when he's had his opportunity.
And for those, I know that there's a lot of football fans. Basically, Dylan DeMello was paired with another defenseman, Josh Morrissey, and single-handedly, paired with him and without him, Josh Morrissey was a statistical black hole without Dylan DeMello. But when they were paired together, they found success. Again, I don't think, not to zero in on the Jets here, this isn't a Jets show, but, I do think that there will be some wheeling and dealing in the back rooms between the GMs, not only with the Jets, but with everybody else. Because looking at the names that are available for Seattle, I don't think there's the way some of these names go.
And that's one of the things that's really interesting, too. This expansion draft is honestly such a nutty experience as a fan, because while these lists are being confirmed about who is available to take and who is protected, the Seattle team, the GM and their general manager, can sit down and have conversations with other teams and strike deals that do not need to be announced until basically the day before or the day of the expansion draft, I believe.
Yeah, doesn't matter. I think it's the day of, but whatever.
Yeah, basically. So what we may or may not know is that they're exposing a player who we're going, oh my God, why did they expose this guy?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, there's already been a deal where they're sending a pick and a player as payment to Seattle to not take the player that they've exposed.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's such a weird. It's such a weirdly unique experience as a North American. You have to be a franchise league to have this type of thing happen.
Yeah, it's so strange. But I know that they want to compete right away. So you can only assume that some of these big names that are available will be taken. Plus, two, there's another elephant in the room that complicates matters even more, is that Colorado didn't end up giving Landeskog the deal he wanted.
That one was shocking to me, and that's not even an expansion draft thing. That's just the GM of Colorado. So here's something wild. I'm going to try and do a comparison, a little bit high level sport. Imagine a Kevin Durant on your team, one of the best players in the world, one of the best players at his position, decides, his contract's running up and he'd like to sign a new deal. And you wait a year to have this conversation, and now his contract is ending, and now you're asking him to take a big pay cut because you have other issues that you need to sign. And instead of locking down your best player, your captain, your leader, the guy you drafted, who's been your locker room leader for literally his entire career, and you're going to let him walk?
It's insane.
It's insane. If I'm an Avs fan, I'm livid.
I would be,
and I'm shocked because Sakic up to this point, their GM has been fantastic.
Yes, he has, and like as evidenced by the team in the last couple of years. Like, I really thought Colorado was going to take it in the West. To be completely honest, obviously that wasn't correct, but still, and you have to think that if I'm Ron Francis, I'm looking at Landeskog being like, here's the captain I built my team around.
Yeah,
and he's available. Like as a UFA, it's like, what is going on, Colorado? Come on now, it's just absolutely bonkers.
One thing I think Seattle has in their pocket too right now is not only they're a new franchise, they have this beautiful new renovated arena, the new Key Arena they're going to be playing in, which looks unbelievable.
Yeah.
But they have an owner who's willing to spend money to get things done. They have an owner who's willing to spend his own money to get things done. Mm-hmm. The city didn't spend on that arena. It was him. Part of that arena being renovated was they had to redo traffic around it. Do you know who paid for that? The owner of the Seattle Kraken, right?
Which is how it should be.
How it should be, but unfortunately, it's an exception to the rule, right?
Yes.
So, if I'm Ron Francis, I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling comfortable, and I'm feeling like I'm in the playoffs next year.
I would, if I had to put money on it, I would say absolutely 100% Seattle will make the playoffs in the 2022.
So here's a question for you on this expansion draft. Are we going to go through this again? Are we going to go to 33 and 34 teams in this league? Because they keep talking about this. And at this point, it's starting to get too much. When you start breaking into the mid 30s, that's too many in a league.
No, because, it's like fans like rivalry. First of all, from a fan standpoint, I want to see more Winnipeg versus Minnesota, Winnipeg versus Chicago, Winnipeg versus Toronto, and then Winnipeg versus the Western teams, Calgary, Edmonton, more than I want to see Winnipeg. And this is as a season ticket holder. Like, I'll still go see Winnipeg versus Columbus, but I'd much rather see Winnipeg versus Montreal or, like those old school rivalries. Seattle versus... How are you going to get people excited about Seattle versus Carolina on a Tuesday night? You know what I mean? Like, it's... I think I hope this is the last time we see it. That when Vegas came in, there was going to be another one because you need to have equal divisions, right? You can't have an odd number of teams. Mathematically, it does make sense, but how long? Like, Quebec City will get a team. The question is when, and the question is, will it be new or will they take somebody? And I think at this point, you have to do what Winnipeg did, and you have to take a team that's struggling, because more than 32 teams, like 32 teams makes sense in a bracket. It makes sense schedule wise. You have the way the NHL is laid out, it makes sense in divisions. To keep messing up with these numbers, it's just, yeah. I don't think
how North American sports are, though, right? It's, those owners are sitting there going, we could get another $500 million fee for a team. Let's do it. Right? It's that. I love that there's more jobs available for hockey players at the top level of the league. I think that's one of the things that people forget about, is that these expansions actually give more jobs to players who may not have the opportunity. And I always think there is more top level NHL quality players than there is jobs available.
So that was another interesting thing that I, just as a side note, Ray Ferraro posited the question a few days ago. I think it was right for it. Doesn't matter. He posited the question is, at what point does the top level talent start getting watered down? And at what point are you paying NHL prices? And again, for all the football fans out there, and I know you have a lot, Scooter. I don't know what the prices of going to a game in Europe are, but like all in all, you're looking at 100 Canadian dollars a head. So about 80 euros for a night at an NHL game per person. And that's usually just parking and entry.
That's not food. That's not beer.
It's not a souvenir. Like, we would easily spend $100, $120, a night at a Jets game. And that's like just to walk in the building and maybe have one drink. So anyway, at what point do you start having to be like, I'm paying these prices and I'm basically seeing like a third of an AHL game,
Here's a suggestion for you. I actually liked a shorter schedule. I was kind of hoping they wouldn't go back to an 82 game schedule, and it would be more in divisional play, because I thought I actually really kind of liked. I know it was an all Canadian division, so it was a little bit obviously kind of a dream for the Canadians in a sense. Like we were able to see these matchups all the time that mattered practically every game. But I'd like to see more interdivisional play and less cross-conference play. If we're going to keep growing into this bigger league, I'd like to see more development of within the division, close teams that I can theoretically drive to see a game.
Right. And as we've said, that's sun up till sundown.
Yeah. And we mean drive. Like I mean a full day of driving. But
yeah. Is it 1,300 kilometers less? That's a day's drive. Anyway, but no, I don't know. Like I have a hard time with a lot of the players this year said even with the less like, cross country travel in the Canadian division, they said that the travel was too difficult. I think we're going to stick to an 82 game season because it allows for more travel flexibility. But I have no no sympathy for that because they're flying in charter jets that take off and land when
they're compensated pretty well as well.
Yeah. I cannot tell you how many times I've flown like 14 hours, gotten into some like hotel in Asia at 1 a.m. and had to wake up at 10 a.m. to do press for the gig the next day. Like, I think in 2019, we flew 5 times the average NHL team, and it's just like I like when they start whining about travel. I'm like, listen, guys, like it's fine, you're fine. I don't think the league sees a shortened schedule, like you said earlier. North American money, North American franchise owners want the dollars. 22 more games, 22 more nights of fans in the stands, 22 more nights of concession sales, of merchandise sales, of everything ancillary to a hockey game that earns a franchise cash, which is why I don't think we'll see the 60-game season in the future.
I know I'm on a dream. I know I'm asking for the impossible. I'm telling the owners, listen, just make less money for the good of the sport. And they're not going to ever listen to that argument ever. No. That's why we barely see hockey players in the Olympics. Right?
Yeah.
Like every player, you ask an athlete, would you like to go to the Olympics? Pretty sure you're going to get a yes most of the time, if not all the time.
Oh, for sure.
You ask an owner, can my athlete go to the Olympics, please? No.
Why not? Well, we don't want to pay the insurance.
I don't want to pay the insurance on his contract, which, by the way, I already have insured his contract on another insurance deal. But we can get into that. I'm probably going to have an episode about contract insurance one of these days because I think it's one of the things that people don't realize is proliferating through sports at a crazy level. But anyway, Dan, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Hey,
I really appreciate you having you on.
Thanks so much for having me, and it was nice to cover a range of topics about the sport we love so much, from the very serious to the very exciting and everything in between. So all the best to you and your viewers, and it truly has been a pleasure, and we'll see you next time.
Well, Dan, before you run off, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitch a few nights a week as the world opens up again. Now that people are vaxxed and waxed and ready for summer, there's going to be more events. So my Twitch schedule is going to be a little all over the place. But you can find me at twitch.tv/MadZerglin. That's MadZerglin. I stream League of Legends, and I also do live music. Happy to be your background tunes whenever you want. So come by, say hi. And I'm sure Scoots will throw out a little shout out in the chat.
He's forgetting to say it's a pants off dance off once a week. It's pretty fantastic.
Correct. A lot of fun. We have fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously. It's all good.
Yeah. So big thank you, Dan. I'll definitely drop some links in the chat. And you guys, for those who are listening, big thank you for sticking around. This is episode 2 of Scoot Talk Sports. Thank you so much for listening. All the best.